Today's meeting of the Corporate Governance Committee. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch it live, the recording will be made available for the meeting. Moving on to the agenda, item 1, minutes of the meeting held in January. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held in January are taken as read, confirmed, and signed. Is that agreed? Against? No. Excellent. Questions? There are no public questions. Questions from members? There are no member questions. No urgent items of business. So item 5, declarations of interest. Declarations of interest. Excellent. Item 6, petitions. There are no petitions. So we move to the first item of the main business, and that is the external audit plan. And I'll ask Jason to introduce the item, and then we've got Helen and Grant here from Grant. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'm just going to say a few words to introduce the report. This report is to present the external audit plans for the 25-26 financial year. The report includes 2 plans, one for the County Council's accounts and the Leicestershire Pension Fund accounts, attached as Appendix A and B to the report. I won't say any more at this stage, and I'll hand over to Helen, who the audit, and Grant on the pension fund audit through their report.
Jason, and good morning everybody. As Jason said, what you've got in front of you today is the audit plan for the County Council and also the audit plan for the pension fund. I will take you through the County Council plan and then I'll hand over to my colleague Grant Patterson to do the pension fund. So the County Council plan covers our responsibilities for both the financial statements and the value for money work that you will be familiar with. Again, the format is a standard format, and for those of you who have seen audit plans before, it follows exactly the same format as you will have seen previously. It covers the significant risks for the audit, and when I talk about risks, it's important to remember that I'm talking about the audit risk. And when we talk about audit risk, it is the risk that I might give the incorrect opinion. So slightly different from risk you might be used to thinking about on this committee. So we cover 3 significant risks within the plan: management override of control, which is mandated by the auditing standards. We look at, and then the other 2 are around key estimates, valuation of land and buildings, and also the valuation of the pension liability. Worth highlighting the changes to the code this year in terms of the arrangements for valuation. This will be the first year that the code actually allows indexation of assets. So that will be a change which we will look at as part of your estimation processes for PPE at the end of the year. We highlight materiality, which is based on a benchmark of your expenditure. So that again is broadly in line with what we have determined in previous years. We also set out the audit fee, which is in line with the scale fee, and confirm we have no independence issues that we need to make you aware of. I think what is worth pointing out is we've focused quite a lot on the logistics this year. You will be aware that backstop legislation is still in place, which you have complied with. Every year it has been in place. What is important now is those deadlines are coming forward. They are coming forward next year from a statutory point of view until the end of January. However, we are treating this very much as a dry run for the following year, where the dates come forward significantly to the end of November. You are well placed to meet that, but it is important that we put the necessary level of focus in to escalate things through and get the audit completed in a much quicker timescale than we have done previously. With that in mind, we're increasing the level of interim work that we're actually undertaking from prior years. And due to the timing of the committee and the timing of the reports, we've actually already made a start on the interim work. That is generally going well, although we've had to escalate just a couple of areas where we were missing some reports to be able to start that sampling. We've got a bit more time before the accounts are final, the accounts come to us, but it's important that we absolutely make the most of that time to set ourselves up for success, to get the accounts finished and completed by the end of November. So we can all prove, both as an audit team and as the finance team, that you can hit that deadline the final year, which we know will be a challenge. Probably the other thing I just wanted to say is you've obviously got the risks around VFM as well contained within the plan. It probably won't come as a surprise to you that the risks we've highlighted are around financial sustainability, particularly with a focus on the DSG deficit, recognising that that was our key recommendation last year. We do obviously highlight the changes in the recent government announcements around DSG, and we recognise that that does change the risk profile, and we will focus on that as part of our work as we go through that during the summer. I'm going to stop there and open for any questions before I hand over to Grant.
Thank you. Anybody got any questions at this stage? Yeah, Rosita.
Thank you. Just a point of information. Thank you for the report. What's the triennial valuation testing work?
Are you looking at the county council plan, or are you looking at the pension fund plan?
I don't know. Should I?
Okay. I was going to cover trailer in my bit, but basically every 3 years the pension fund is revalued, so it's triennial, and as part of that, the actuary will produce a valuation report, and as part of the work to get to that valuation report, they request information from the pension fund, normally around member data, cash flows, etc. And then that report then becomes underpins what's called a roll forward approach. So in your account, so this is where it links into what Helen's doing. In the county's accounts for 25-26, you'll have the net pension liability. The information that's contained within that actuary's valuation report around member data, around those sort of cash flows, will then be rolled forward from 31st of March 25 into 31st of March 26 to get to the figures in the 25-26 accounts. Therefore, as pension fund auditors, what we do is just check that the information that the county or the pension fund provided to the actuary was complete and accurate from the systems at that time. So when the actuary produced their valuation, they hopefully produce an accurate valuation.
Well, I could just come back, and that increases the cost.
It's because it's not, we do it once every 3 years, it's not part of the annual scale fee. So it's a one-off every 3 years. And we'll be doing this across all of our clients. If you look across other clients, the fee depends on the number of members because it depends on the level of testing. So it goes from 5 to 10 to 15, depending on the size of your fund. So, yeah.
Thank you. Deborah.
Thank you. Just on page 16, I'm not sure what page it is of your report there. You've just done the value for money arrangements. You mentioned the dedicated schools grant and the recent government announcement. It's just you've added in there about the budget gap in the medium term. So what sort of level of risk are you putting on that budget gap currently?
So as we do with any of our sort of value for money sort of risk assessments, it's the language that we use, I think, under the code. So you will recognise that last year we raised key recommendations around both the DSG, but also the amount of savings that you need to make going forward to balance the budget. For us as audit, if we think we need to do some significant work as part of our VFM work, we need to raise a significant weakness to then do that further work to address it. So again, it's slightly different terminology. We're not rag rating it in the way you might see from officer reports. For us, we're saying there's a level of risk there. That is something for us as audit that we need to do some work on and we need to understand further. So as part of our work over the summer period, we'll be looking at the arrangements officers have put in place for meeting those savings gaps. What are the plans going forward? How achievable are they? And that will form part of our report that we do as part of the value for money work later on in the year.
Any further questions at this stage? No? Grant, are you coming in?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So within your pack, if you're moving on to the audit plan around the pension fund, a lot of what I'm going to say is links into is similar to what Helen has just talked to you about. the covering report actually prepared by officers does cover the key areas quite very well in terms of that. But then just looking at the pension fund itself, again, no significant changes in our risk assessment for the year. Therefore, the plan you're seeing this year is very similar to last year. It is worth noting there's a lot of change going on within the pension funds, with the government's Fit for Future and legislation going through, but that's going to sort of come into 26, 27 rather than 25, 26. Therefore, in terms of this year's financial statements, they should be very similar to prior years, and therefore our risk assessment hasn't changed. There may be a couple of extra disclosures in there around how those changes will impact the fund. So on that basis, we end up in a similar set of county that our significant risks for this year are similar to last year. Management overrider controls, Helen said, that is a non-rebuttable significant risk under auditing standards. So we've included that. But as part of that, we will be reviewing the updated arrangements that you put in place for authorising low-value journals that there's below 20k that we picked up as part of prior year audits. And then the other significant risk is around evaluation of, we call them level 3 investments. These are the harder to value investments because they don't have observable inputs. And we will follow up management progress on obtaining some of the relevant supporting information from a couple of investment managers that were slow to provide it last year. Just to say, at this time, we do continue to anticipate that your direct property investments will not be material, and therefore they haven't been highlighted within the plan at this point, but we'll revisit that once we get the draft financial statements. I've already answered a question on 25 triennial valuation, but that is in the plan again this year. And in terms of materiality, we base it on gross investment assets, and it's increased slightly this year because the value of the assets have increased, and it's basically 1.4% of your gross investment assets. In a slight change to last year in terms of we've moved away from setting a blanket lower materiality on the fund account transactions. So those are the income and expenditure transactions where you have contributions and benefits payable. And last year we set a materiality based upon all of a blanket one across all of the lines in that account. We've now moved to doing a more focused materiality on both just benefits payable and contributions, and it's 10% of those line items, and that's because we believe that users of the accounts will be more interested in benefits and contributions, or those are the areas of interest of users. Again, picking up on Helen's point, interim audit for 25-26 is currently underway, and page 51 of your pack does give details of that. It's going well from our perspective, and again, we're just trying to get more on the front foot. I suppose we've been in a more fortunate position than the county in terms of being able to get through the audit quicker. In terms of the pension fund, the numbers are big, but it's a fairly well-oiled process now in terms of getting the pension fund. So we don't anticipate any issues with hitting the November deadline, and we'll be aligning our work with Dowdall County, and in fact there's a sort of joint audit team across both this year, so they'll be working together to ensure that both audits get completed for November. Again, as Helen said, we are satisfied we remain independent of the fund, and that's shown in 6971 of your pack. And as picking up an area, I think as members have read, the increase in the fee this year is primarily around that one-off additional fee for the triennial audit. Other than that, it's in line with the scale fee. We do have to do one additional piece of work for IAS 19 purposes around one employer in relation to providing their assurances, and that's an additional 1,100, and that's the same as last year. So I will stop there and happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Any questions? Deborah.
Just a quick one about the backstop and what's the risk of us not meeting there. What happens if we don't meet the deadlines? Is there any issues with that?
Well, I mean, if you don't hit the back, I'll pass on to Helen, because I'm being a pension fund auditor these days. I've not really come across the backs that happen to do it. You get a disclaimed audit opinion, and then you get difficulty in regaining assurance, because normally if the audit's not complete by the backstop, it means we have not finished our work in some areas of the accounts. And then once you get behind, it's very hard to get back up on, get back into the saddle and do that. So that's why I'm silly council. That's why Helen has worked really closely with officers to make sure that the council has hit the backstop. Say on the pension fund, in line with most pension funds, the way it operates, it's part of the council, but it's sort of fairly independent finance team. we've never had the sort of issue. We've always been ready ahead of the backstop, and that won't change. We normally prioritise the pension fund as well because of those assurances. So I should be finished around about September, October, and then Helen will be picking up the county. But Helen has more experience, good and bad, about the backstop, so she can probably relate that to.
Yeah, and I just want to add to what Grant says. Hitting the backstop means, as an auditor, I'm effectively not giving you any assurance over the numbers in the accounts because I would sign a disclaimed opinion. Then that makes it hard going forward in terms of your opening balances. So you then have to do a lot more additional work in future years to get you back to a position where you could have a clean audit opinion. In terms of what impact that has, it becomes then you fall under the spotlight very heavily of MHCLG in terms of why have you got into that position? What does that mean? Are you actually governing those accounts and your finances in the way you should be doing, particularly for you as a council where you've done really well in terms of maintaining that position and you are not in that backstop arrangement? What you do not want to do is be in a position where you are going backwards. But with the deadline coming increasingly forward, that presents more risk than you have had previously, which is why we are focusing really hard this year on making sure that we don't end up in that situation. And we, as an audit team, we are doing things differently to make sure we are clearing that work earlier. And we are working really hard with officers as well, and encouraging for you to look at your processes and maybe think about, can you do things differently so you can close earlier? Are there different things you can do around estimates? Are there different decisions you can do? Can you tweak your processes and arrangements so you can pull a lot more stuff forward so we all have a better chance? So it is about a different mindset, and that's what we're trying to work really hard on this year so we don't create a risk that none of us want.
I just wonder how this is going to fit in with local government reorganisation as well. Is that going to have a huge impact on this work where we're sort of trying to do LGR on top of everything else? Is that going to, I don't know whether that's more officer questions or audit, what impacts that going to have?
It's sort of a slight statement of the office, but as audits have got bigger and more focused, it obviously takes more sort of officer time, so it does put that under stress. I suppose the thing that has come up quite a bit is if you've got an area where you're sort of reorganising and someone's got disclaimed opinions, is there a deeper sort of problem under there that then kind of as you're going into reorganisation, trying to bring a load of councils together, there's sort of blind spots in what you're trying to do and potentially sort of pitfalls as you go through it. So it's probably more around that side about how much assurance you can take from the numbers now. You're going to get sort of nasty surprises. I don't think Jason may know better than me, but I think, is it just Northwest in Leicestershire who's behind? So I think we're not too bad in Leicestershire compared to sort of some areas, and it's so it's probably manageable, but it is just the sheer workload and trying to fit everything in together.
Any other questions? Oh, sorry, Bill. Yes.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about the pension audit, but we met a little while ago in the LGPS where we were talking about the pension audit. As a council, we sort of subcontract our pension arrangements to the LGPS. Surely by doing a pension audit for the council and a pension audit for the LGPS, is that not duplication of work?
Right, I think talking about LGPS Central, which is the pool, I believe in that sense, and the pool manages the assets or investment assets. So they're a different body. I'm not, if I misunderstood your
No, I didn't mean the pool. I meant actually the LGPS group that employs a pool. The local government scheme here in Leicestershire covers the county council as well as a number of other institutions in the area, and we invest through the pool.
Yes, I mean, when I say the pension fund audit, that is the LGPS pension fund audit. So it's Leicestershire Pension Fund who are auditing. So it is only one audit of the pension fund. What we do as pension fund auditor, though, is provide assurances to the employers or the key employers, key council employers in that fund as part of our RS19 work. Now that's for councils, that's within the fee. It's only if a body is outside of that that additional fee gets charged. So there shouldn't be inefficiencies. There's a memorandum of understanding at the moment in terms of the way that works. So I think there shouldn't be duplication. I thought you were saying that in terms of the pool that they are a separate entity. So.
No, thank you very much. No, I just thought that you were auditing both, but you're not. Sorry, my misunderstanding. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, it might be helpful, just one clarification why it does come to both, because it is, as you point out, it's the same account, same audit, but because this committee gets the benefit of seeing all the internal audit kind of reports and sort of the financial controls and process and governance arrangements of the council, and it is the council's kind of team, it's Jason's team who pulls those accounts together. A lot of the assurance about the process around the kind of the production of those pension fund accounts overlaps, very, very heavily with the assurance around the production of the LCC account. So that's why this committee gets that oversight, because we're producing the two together. But we do bring the accounts obviously to the pension committee because it's their accounts, as Ms. Piper's kind of pointed out.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
Yeah, so it's on clarity for that, just so those in that sense, in a way, in order to speak, this committee is those charged with governance. So because under your constitution, you're the ones who formally sign off the council's accounts. So that's why they come here. Yes, the pensions committee does oversee the annual report, which is slightly different, and we give a slightly different opinion on the annual report. It has the accounts in it though, so we give a consistency. So we, as pension fund auditor, do the work on the pension fund accounts that are in the council's accounts, and give an opinion on that. And then there's a consistency opinion that goes in the annual report. But we are aware that the pensions committee does that. We discussion with officers, we come and just report once. At other councils, to be honest, I go to pensions committee and audit committee. It depends on how they want to do that. So the offer's always there. If officers feel that it's useful for me to go to pensions committee, I can do that as well. I just need to let us know.
Thank you, everybody. Any further questions on this? No? Okay, so the recommendation is that we note the report. All agreed? Anybody against? No, that's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for our guest from Grant Thornton. So we move on to the Internal Audit Service Progress Report. Neil, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So this is the first report from me today, and it is our Internal Audit Service progress against the 25-26 Internal Audit Plan and our high importance recommendations, and also some details on performance. So internal audit operates to professional standards, and it requires that we provide a risk-based plan to support an overall conclusion on the council's governance, risk management and internal control. That plan was approved on the 31st of March 2025, excuse me, and the resource allocation at that time is shown as paragraph 3. So the first part of the report refers to the work undertaken for the period for which the detail is in Appendix 1. The paragraph 6 on page 78 of the report is new and summarises the outcome of audits so far, with 82% in that period, 82% returning substantial assurance. And since the report was compiled, the status for a number of other audits has changed, including a further 5 that have been completed. Part 2 of this report, paragraphs 11 to 15, outlines our high importance recommendation process, and that's where material risk has been identified. So these high importance recommendations remain under the committee's oversight until I confirm that sufficient action has been taken to remove them from reports. Extensions to implementation dates are allowed only with valid justification from management and are reported to chief officers and to this committee. So paragraph 12 in the report summarises recommendations to new, those in progress and closed categories. And for those in progress, a brief reason is given for allowing extensions to their implementation. It is positive that high importance recommendations from 6 audits have been closed in this period. Paragraphs 13 to 15 provides an update on 2 major audits on adults and children's direct payment systems, which both returned high importance recommendations. These were reported in the November committee. It's pleasing that the issues with the prepaid card provider are mostly resolved, and the implementation of the recommendations is now being progressed. The details on high importance recommendations is contained in Appendix 2. Anything that's in bold font indicates either a new or updated position. And then the final part of this report is just to provide some information on the resources used and the number of audits that have completed, either completed, in progress or not yet started. Paragraphs 18 and 19 provide reasons for variations. A reminder that the information in front of you is all at the 28th of February, and the positions for both resources of input and also audits completed are further improved. Paragraph 22 reports a slightly better position at this point rather than comparable to last year. And then paragraphs 25 and 26 explain the requirement on me to form an overall conclusion on the control environment, which I've mentioned is your governance, risk management and internal control process, and that I'm confident of being able to provide a robust conclusion for the year. Finally, paragraphs 27 and 28 explain that we need to act fast to ensure the coming year, which starts on Wednesday, is adequately resourced. That's all I'd like to say on the report. Gladly take any questions either on the report itself or on the appendices.
Thank you very much for that, Neil. Any questions, comments? Yes, Bill.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, and this is probably my pedancy. In paragraph 3, you talk about the number of days. One presumes you mean days work as opposed to calendar days, because otherwise it would take over 3 years to do 1 year's accounts.
They are the available days to work, net of anything like annual leave and public holidays, etc. Yeah.
Anything else? Yes, Rosita.
Thank you. On page 81.13, you're talking about adult and children direct payments delayed, and you said it's now being progressed. So what does that mean? Have they all been paid up? And, so how is that working out? And can you also tell me why I wasn't here in November or didn't, and what steps are we taking to ensure that that doesn't happen? Thank you.
Apologies if you weren't at the November committee or read that report, but there was quite a lot of detail provided about the situation that arose. So it's a nationwide issue. We commissioned a prepaid card provider. I think the name's on here somewhere. And they were doing some updates to their systems, and it took the whole of the systems down nationwide, across all councils that were using them. So that we had a period of an extended period of a number of months where cards were not able to be used, and there was lots of. I'm sorry.
It caused a lot of disruption, but we were able to do workarounds where people could continue with the care and making payments. But it was hassles on things like setting up new cards. We couldn't reconcile transactions before the initial migration sort of problem. But the actual care, we did have some hiccups, because you can't have thousands of people being impacted and not have some hiccups. But it was pretty good in truth in terms of the level of complaints were pretty low. But with that, in terms of how the service users are now with these sort of prepaid cards, they're fine. It's more kind of the extended mop-up type of things that we have to do in the back office to make sure things that were going on in disruption, we've got all the numbers sorted. We haven't lost any money anywhere between the migrations. But the actual kind of issue is pretty much sorted now. It's just the final tidy up.
I apologise for not having read the report, but I still have to ask the question. So if that was a problem from externally, that obviously then caused us internally a lot of resources. So was that refunded? And, has this external problem been resolved or addressed so it doesn't happen again?
In terms of the address bit, because obviously we're dependent on an external provider, they're FCA regulated. It should, in theory, it should never have happened in the first place. But they had a supply that they were concerned about failing on those. So it's a natural market type event, as it were, that you can't always take away all risk. But as far as we know, they've got that more robust measures in place. They've got backup providers if things like that happen, and we're looking internally as well about how could we, if something like that happens again, how can we switch over to something else quicker? So we're putting those layers in place. We can't guarantee it 100%, but we're better than we were before this incident, if that gives you some comfort. In terms of the payment, it's very hard to get payments back from suppliers above the amount that you pay normally in the contract. They tend to often kind of provisions kind of cap that out, and I suppose that extension of kind of how far they'll pay the liability from recollection. You'll remember we did get some money back. You remember? We'll have to come back to you on that, but I think we did get a bit of a refund.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Oh, Jill, did you want to come?
No, I was.
Okay, yeah, fine. So we're asked to note the updates on the progress and the implementation of high importance recommendations on the performance against the plan as of the 28th of February. I move the recommendation. Is that agreed? Anybody against? No? Excellent. And we're back over to Neil again for the internal, the annual plan and the internal audit.
Thanks again, Chair. Yeah, so whereas that previous report was almost the closure of 25-26, the next report is about the next year for 26-27. So I did previously mention briefly that I have to give an overall conclusion at the end of the year on governance, risk management and internal control. And paragraph 2 of this report explains that in order to form that conclusion, I need to create a plan of audits across a wide scope. The paragraphs 4 and 5 briefly explain that we have a rolling 3-year risk-based audit needs model, and 26-27 is the final year. However, we don't just rely on that model, we input new auditable areas and emerging risks, they're all considered. So the first part of the report covers how I've calculated our resource base for 26-27, but that I've had to factor in that as from Wednesday next week, we then have 3 vacancies. There are risks around recruiting good quality replacements, especially with the unknowns around local government reorganisation, where people just will not want to move over the next few months. And there are other risk factors such as unplanned absences and leavers. So the table in paragraph 7 shows I'm planning to allocate just over, well, nearly 1,400 days to conducting audits relevant to the County Council this coming year, which is just around 120 days less than last year. That 120 days is primarily due to the gap in the vacancies. There's a note in the table which I also allocate time to providing risk management and governance functions and also managing the insurance service. So they're not specific audits, but those functions do help me in my overall opinion on the control environment. The part 2 of the report starts from paragraph 8, and that is how those resources are planned to be allocated, starting with the audits in progress at the end of the year, and those not started from prior years, which still remain high risk. We've also gained inputs from departments and have allocated some time to issues that are generic across similar county councils, for instance, the impact of local government reorganisation. Paragraph 10 reports that the provisional plan is detailed in Appendix 1, and that plan has been reviewed and questioned by chief officers. It is a provisional plan, so it can be changed, and it's planned to allocate just over 1,000 days, including contingency. I then allocate a small amount of time to reviewing work conducted by our colleagues at Nottingham City Internal Audit. They report to this committee for their work that they do in East Midlands Shared Service. And then I also allocate a small amount, 50 days, to proactive counter fraud work, which is really welcome. So the total amount of audit and counter fraud data the County Council is just over 1,100 days. The summary, paragraph 11 shows a summary of those 111 days, and then the days are split by type on the top of page 112. Paragraph 12 explains that almost 260 days have been estimated to manage the LCC internal audit and counter fraud function overall, so bringing the total resources to just over, well, almost 1,400 days, slightly, and this is where the 120-day difference to the previous year comes in. And finally, in this part of the report, it's important to remind the committee that the plan, before you use only a statement of intent, there's a need for flexibility and for review. So it will be reviewed and adjusted as necessary in response to changes in the council's business, risks, operations, programme system and controls, and significant changes will be reported to this committee. The final part of the report in paragraph 16 explains a range of performance measures chosen. I'm not going to delve into those. I guess that's all I have to say on this part of and I will gladly take any questions on the report or the appendix.
Thank you, Neil. Anybody? Yes, Gordon first and then Kerry.
Yeah, thanks, Neil, for your report. Just looking at your audit plan on page 117 of the pack, Members' Code of Conduct. It says new in terms of that. What are you actually looking at as regards to
that? It's a bit like when we look at the Employees' Code of Conduct and the compliance to it. So it'll be in the same vein, and just working with the monitoring officers to see where we can look for areas that may need to be improved in terms of compliance, and any suggestions that we can throw in from an audit perspective. I know that colleagues in other councils have done this in the past, and they've done it in a sort of, I use the phrase, a light-hearted way in terms of a quiz or something, something like that, to engage, be able to better engage rather than reading lots of information. So it will be for similar vein to how we apply the code of conduct audits for employees, but widened out to the members.
Thank you. Good. Can you just switch your microphone on, Kerry?
Thank you, Chair. Page 110, paragraph 7, allocated days for audits. All of them seem to be roughly the same, apart from servicing the committee and advising officers, which has jumped from 64 to 102. What's the reason for that?
It's actually reduced from, it's the other way around, it's reduced from 102 in the previous year to 64. I will stick on it though, because it is important. So we're, as a function, we do time record, so we're very able to look at previous years and gauge where that resource should be better allocated. So in totality overall, it's not much difference, but we shift things around. So in terms of last year, we took on an extra committee and we had to build in extra time for that. This year, we're a little bit more, I guess, in tune with when the committees are around and what's got to go to the committee. Is that helpful? Yeah.
Rosita?
Page 115 again, the annual audit plan, and just a few questions. First, my first question is how and who chooses the areas? Because for me, say for instance, I don't know, property, farms, Machu, which just springs to mind, because so there are things which sprung to mind I haven't seen recently on the audit plan. So the question, as I said, who chooses the audit plan and how does it variate? And my next question is, it says Operation Houston, Raleigh, Sacramento, Bombardier, and I went, what on earth is that? So, can you explain? Thank you.
Take them in the order you ask them. So, who chooses? Well, it's a combination of my audit managers talking to directors and their management team in terms of, and we started this as explained in the report very briefly this time in the report. A 3-year rolling cycle of audits. So we gauge them on risk, and they all go into a massive model that we then pick off as we go through the years, the audits we think are the right risk for that period of time. So, and then we feed into that model also, into the planning side, things that have come in new over the 3 years, things that my colleagues in other county councils have bringing forward from and just new and emerging risks. So it's a major. It's not just one person who chooses it. It's a combination of thoughts, ideas, information that we collate all together to make an overall plan. I then take a plan based on what just reviewing what's ready to go. We can't do everything. We haven't got, as I just said earlier on, we haven't got the resources to do everything. So we have to look at the higher risk elements and put those forward to chief officers, which I did a couple of weeks back, and chief officers then had a few comments on that, and they slightly amended the plan, and then it came to this committee to review.
If I may come back on that, but surely if I have a department that isn't performing very well, or an issue where I think there is an issue, so I wouldn't hardly come and say, "Out, Neil, can we audit that?" Because that would be very, very stupid of me. So I would only, put forward something where I think it would be, not open to discussion. So surely, what is the well, how can I say it? How do you or the team pick things where you think there are real issues and that needs, random issues that you think that might need, auditing?
I thought that I'd explain, it's a risk-based approach. If I was to go and choose everything that I thought needed auditing every day, we'd get no focus in terms of our spread of audits across all of the county council. So we have to plan audits that are going to cover off the areas of governance, risk management, and internal control. So I need to take account of that. You're absolutely right. If there are issues, then we may take focus from the directors to be pinpointed in those areas, and that may relate to the second question that you asked. So, but I don't know what else I can add really in terms of how we do it.
At Harborough, for instance, where I'm a district councillor, when we're going to the audit process, the auditor says to us as members, are there any certain, issues you want auditing? And, so then that is considered and goes into the audit plan as well. And I don't think, it has never happened here. So, and as I said, when I look through it, I never see any of the ones which, I find are, of concern to me. But anyway, so what is Euston, Raleigh, Sacramento and Bombardier?
You just come in on that.
I just come in briefly. I mean, as a director, I take your point about there's got to be a level of independence, but as a director, you kind of want to be ahead of your problems before they happen. So if you have got kind of either a growing concern or worried somewhere is a bit of a blind spot for you, you are keen that audit gets in early, so they kind of maybe give you a kind of a, sort of some recommendations, but it's not got to the point where it's a big problem. So there is that good alignment between sort of directors' internal audit. But I suppose to give you some assurance, there's no, as a director, you can't restrict internal audit going into areas. So if they have picked up concerns, either through kind of just issues that are happening, level of complaints that are happening, members sort of getting in touch, whistleblowing, etc., internal audit's got absolute freedom to kind of select their areas themselves to go in. In terms of members selecting things, it does, I suppose it comes up where, I don't know, Neil and his team do keep an eye on the different committees, whether it's scrutiny or this committee, and trying to get a sort of a feel of what's kind of getting raised there. But if members do have specific areas, particularly at this committee, you can raise items. So in terms of the ones that you've picked up on there, some of the sort of property type assets, they do tend to be on the audit programme on a sort of a routine basis, just because of partly the sort of service delivery impact, but also the sort of size of them. So the Investing in Leicestershire programme, the corporate asset management plan are in this existing 3-year strategy. And those property assets as well, they don't just get hit on the specific audits, anything around procurement type work or financial controls, things like that. They are an area that potentially gets reviewed at that point as well. So you get reviewed on the type of activity they're doing, but just the general themes that audit look like as well. So, but if there are areas members have got a concern around, like I say, this committee is a great place to raise it, because you get to see the whole plan, or members are free to kind of contact Neil with specific concerns as well.
Thank you, Deborah.
Thank you.
No, hang on, the Bombardier.
Yeah, so there is a reference. I'm just trying to find it in the actual cover report. I'm just trying to find out which paragraph it is, but paragraph 10. It explains that I'm just touching on some of the things Declan said here. We do get involved in investigations. So that, issues are brought to us where we need to push aside our normal audit routines and investigate a particular issue or problem. So what we don't like to forecast, what we don't like to project in this report is what that is. And but then there may not necessarily be fraud. There may be other reasons behind the investigation, but we anonymise them until we need to report in our counter fraud report, which is in June, and then we give a little bit more detail there. But we only do that once everything is bottomed out, because if, for instance, it is a fraud issue, and if, for instance, we needed to involve the police, we cannot be putting anything in writing. Okay, is that okay?
Great name selection then for secret investigations. Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions from from me. The first one is on the internal audit plan, Appendix 1. There's some blue boxes around some of them. I don't know if that's got any coincidence or what that is. If you could just explain why they've got blue boxes. It's just a
spreadsheet error. That's just not
right. Okay.
The cell that was highlighted when they've done a print.
Right. Okay. I just wondered what that was. My main question is about, mentioned right at the beginning, was about recruitment. You said you've got 3 vacancies going forward, which is quite worrying. And you mentioned that that might be connected to LGR, which I think is even more concerning because that's not going to get any easier as we move forward into that. So I suppose what's the impact for us as a council and the risk to us of not having available staff to carry out the audits that we need to do? And I think that's just going to get worse and worse. So I'm concerned that you're raising that now and we're sort of 2 years or, you know, ahead of LGR. What's the plan going forward?
Auditors, once they're employed, and if they're good, they tend to stay. That's the sort of pattern we've experienced. And we were the two original vacancies we had. They'd worked for us for years, you know, and then they just chose. Actually, one of them chose a different life direction. A lot of that happened during COVID. The other one just moved to a job that was closer to home. So it was quite a surprise for us to lose those when we lost them. The other one that's retiring is retiring. 67, so she go. In terms of where we go from here, and you're absolutely right. I've mentioned about LGR. It is going to be a real risk to us in picking up staff who just don't want to move because they don't know what their outcomes are going to be. So we'll probably go down the agency route, and we've just lost a very good agency who, for reasons other than work, had to stop. He was excellent, and it was working great. So we will go down the agency route to immediately go from now. 1st of April onwards to get people in. Agency, because of their nature, they tend to pick up, put down, pick up, put down. You know, I've got stuff on my desk from people who've retired now are coming back into the market. So that's going to be a good buffer for us, I think, until we understand where we're all going on LGR.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? No? Okay. So we're asked to approve the plan. I'm happy to move the recommendation. Seconded? Yeah, all agreed. Anybody against? No? Excellent. Thank you very much. So we're moving on now to the risk management update. And Neil, I believe that you are presenting this report. However, before we consider the main report, we're also having a presentation from Andrew Others, the Director of Environment and Transport, on the emerging risk of the significant increase in demand for reactive highways maintenance work to address basically the highest levels of road defects the department's ever seen. So welcome, Anne.
Good morning, all. Good morning, committee. Nice to see you. Give you an update on an emerging risk we have. I'm sure it won't be a surprise to you, however, but the level of demand we have for reactive highway maintenance, i.e. potholes. Okay, it won't be a shock to you, I'm sure. Gemma will move on my slide for me. And just to give you an idea of the scale of what we're talking about, you know, I'm sure you'll understand that over the winter, we tend to have the peak time for potholes, you know, both our inspectors finding and reports from members of the public. However, it's fair to say this winter has exceeded every other winter in terms of numbers of potholes and defects that we're seeing coming through the system. So February 24 was our previous highest month for reports for defects at just over 1,100. This year, we're at 2,933 for February, okay? And last year, February 25, it was just under 800. So over 3 times the amount last year and, you know, way over anything our highest peak before that. I'll just caveat before you get really concerned, however, this is a national issue. It's not just Leicestershire. This is hitting right across the country. So I'll take you, just if we move on to the next slide, I'll take you through some of the reasons for that. Sorry, this is just another visual of that. This is month by month numbers. I'll apologise now, I'm not expecting you to read them. It's the pattern I want you to see. That peak at the left-hand side there is the February 24 peak. And as you can see where we are now, on the right-hand side is February and March. And that was kind of the 18th of March. We were just over 1,000. So not the full month, but things are slowing down, but we've still got a lot of reports.
Can somebody's phone? Sorry, can you
We are, it's slowing down slightly, but still really elevated levels we're dealing with. So next slide, we come on to some of the reasons why that's happening. There's a number. The first one is underinvestment over a decade or more. And again, I'm not expecting you to read it. I want you to see the patterns here. The blue bars are the Department for Transport funding we get for highway maintenance. So you can see how that's varied over time. The orange is LCC's own money that tops up and goes into highway maintenance. There's the odd, if you get really keen eyesight, you can see there's a bit of yellow in there. That yellow is one-off DFT funding. Some years they've said to us in February, here's the money for potholes, go and spend it by the end of March. That's that yellow funding. But the really interesting bit about that graph is that kind of, is it grey, blue, grey line across the top there. If we had maintained the 2009-10 levels of funding, which is the bar on the left-hand side, if that had tracked inflation, that's a level of funding we would have had. Now, the gap probably doesn't look too much at that scale, but actually when you do the figures, because our financial colleagues have done it for us, it's probably equivalent of 10 million a year. So over a decade, that's 100 million less investment we've had over into our networks. And when you think about it at the same time, with inflation, our buying power is less. So we're delivering, you know, it's like a double whammy. We're delivering even less works out there. So we've had continual underinvestment. Again, this is national, it's not just Leicestershire, this is a national issue. And at the same time, that inflation thing, that figure there, the 22% increase that was done by the LGA and ADEPT, they did some research. Between 2019 and 2024, they estimated the cost of dealing with potholes, you know, a pothole repair had increased by 22%. Now, you'll see in the report there's other emerging risks, ones around the Iran war and what that's doing in terms of the cost of our fuel. So, you know, the impact, again, even now is even higher because, you know, the cost of oil products, oil-based products has gone way up, which hits directly onto our highway maintenance operation. I feel like I should be passing around the hankies, but, you know, I'll keep going, okay? Next slide. The second reason why we're seeing such an impact on our roads and a deterioration is level of traffic isn't going down. You know, we've seen traffic increase over years and it's still forecast to increase. We've got a big growth agenda, more houses, we want economic growth. Our population levels, and I've never quite managed to understand why, but our population, forecast population levels are higher than the East Midlands regional figure and the English national figure. So we've got a higher population growth coming, and that all generates demand for movement and impact on the network. And in terms of our modelling to 2024, based on those population growth, we're going to see a 29% increase in vehicle kilometres on the road and 30% increase in freight demand. Now, that freight is really important because the thing that absolutely impacts the road surface is axle weight. The more freight, the more 44 tonners, etc., the more impact on our road network, okay? So we've got increasing usage of the network and we've got underinvestment. But I'll keep going, I'm not at the end of the tail. Next one, Gemma, thanks. Yep. Okay, is the weather. Obviously, what happens is when your road network, your surface deteriorates, you'll get some cracks in it, you'll get openings coming up, water gets in there, freeze thaw, which is why we, you know, the peak is potholes tends to be over the winter, freeze thaw action, and you know that causes more openings, more defects to the road surface. We are seeing more intense rainfall, and it's not just in the winter, we are seeing it in summer as well. But for instance, this winter, we in Leicestershire have had our wettest winter ever since records began, 1836. So while we haven't had lots of, thank goodness, I hasten to add, named storms and the devastation they bring, we have had kind of chronic. I heard somebody from the Met Office call it the other week at a presentation, chronic, because it's long term, it's prolonged over a reasonable period, really intense levels of rainfall. That water, one, lying on roads, but two, when they're underwater. Two, then we've had, the dips in temperature as well, all that freeze thaw as well, has just got to the point whereby the deterioration has been exponential. So combination of underinvestment, increased usage, and weather taking its impact, and we're seeing that impact on the network out there. Okay, I'll move on to the next one. So what's the implications of that? I mean, firstly, we have a duty under the Highways Act to keep the network in a safe condition, okay? And the way we defend that, because case law absolutely recognise that the whole network can't be completely safe and perfect all the time, that's not reasonable. But what we have to demonstrate is that we are taking reasonable action to keep that network safe. How we do that is what we call our Section 58 defence, and that's our inspection regime. We have a regime of inspections where we'll go out, and it depends, the frequency depends on the classification of road. Obviously, the E-class roads get the higher frequency. If you're, unclassified country lane somewhere, it's a lesser frequency. But that inspection then picks up the defects, and we have service levels whereby we will respond to a defect depending on how serious it is, what category it is within set timescales. Our being able to demonstrate we do that is our defence against claims. If somebody has some incident on the network, damage to the vehicle, an accident, etc. The impact we've had from this increased peak level of defects over this winter is that we are really struggling on our highway inspections because it's taking them so much longer to get around their inspection schedules because they've got a routine of what they have to do every week, every month, etc. And we're hard pressed, and you'll see there's figures on the slide that show you that. We are having to prioritise what we're looking at, and there again, there's figures up there that show you that we're not meeting those service levels we've got set out there in terms of our response times to those defects. And as a result, and from the increased numbers, we are seeing increased numbers of insurance claims coming through. So not only is there real demand on my teams in terms of inspection and then repairs, but also in Neil's teams and Declan's teams there in terms of our insurance colleagues and our claims. I just want to put that in context for you, however, because we do speak to our colleagues in neighbouring counties, etc. We in Leicestershire have a very good record of defending claims. We pay relatively little. It's not often we pay over 20,000 a year out in claims. Some neighbouring authorities will pay in the high hundreds of thousands every year. And similarly, while our claims have significantly increased on last year, they're still way below other, neighbouring authorities' levels of claims, and they too are seeing increases. So in some ways, it's all relative. However, we do have issues out there in the network we're having to deal with. Next slide. There we go. We are, so what we're doing about it, well, the outlook, workload is under pressure from all sides there, as I've said. We are having to change how we work. Under kind of business as usual, we aim for round about 95%, the high 90s% of first time fix when we go out to a defect. It's most cost effective, etc. We do the first time fix. We have the hot boxes with the hot material, so they can go out, cut it, put the hot material in, do the right thing, seal it, and that's the first time permanent repair. Because of the volume we have now of Cat 1 safety defects, so we have to get to those within 72 hours and repair them, we are doing the vast majority of work are now temporary repairs. So we're going out, we're doing the temporary repair, and sometimes, unfortunately, as you all know, they will come out again. They don't last because they're not permanent, or as permanent as we can make them. But we're having to do that because to keep the network safe, we're having to do that because the sheer volume to get around the county and do that. What that means is over the next few months, we are going to have a very increased programme of work about going back round to all those temporary repairs to make them permanent. Now, normally we wouldn't have that in a normal work year. So we've programmed from April what our new highway maintenance programme will be for the coming year. We are now going to have to change that to include significant element of work that is going back to make this permanent. And the other implication that most people won't get is when we're doing the temporary repairs, that's revenue funding. The permanent repairs, when we go back round, I know it's a technicality, but accountants like to keep us right on this, will be capital funding. So that will come out our capital allocation for next year. So that means there's less capital money to do the more preventative works. And we all know the preventative work is the work we need to do because that stops the defects and potholes happening in the first place. So that's not a great outlook either. What else was I going to say in this one? We're reviewing our strategy then because, you know, I think just from the past few years and what's happened this year, I think we have to review our strategy to say this kind of volume over the winter is going to be more business as usual. That's going to become the norm. So we're going to have to review our forward programs to take into account of that. So we will be undertaking that work as well. Okay, I'll just move on if that's all right, Gemma. National picture, just to give you, you know, I have said it is a national thing, but just to reassure you, we're not alone in this. There is something that happens every year called the alarm survey. They go out and they ask every authority, what's your backlog, etc., and they come up with a figure. And as you can imagine, it goes up every year. The figure this year, that just came out a few weeks ago, 18.2 billion to get England's roads to a safe and, you know, steady state, the state we would want them to be in. So they reckon that's, you know, would take you 12 years to attempt that if you had the right money to do it. Okay. Some slightly, just to put that in a different context, just to add on to that, that's a 54% increase on the figure that was a decade ago. So we're not going in the right direction. And actually, the work has concluded that 49% of the road network, the local road network, has less than 15 years structural life. However, the current funding means that frequency of resurfacing local roads is once every 97 years. So as you can imagine, that doesn't go. 49% of the road network hasn't more than 15 years life left, but we get round it once every 97 years. Okay, that's the national picture. Slight positive on that, however, I will just add in, the government has announced, they announced in December, and it starts next month, 4-year funding allocations for highways, a consolidated funding pot for highways and transport, that includes highways maintenance. Positives of that are it gives us the ability to plan, program and procure and deliver over a 4-year program, which is much better than going from one year to another, kind of, you know, what's our funding. So that's positive. And actually the funding level has gone up. We have got over the next 4 years, just under 145 million. So that starts this coming year, we've got 28.9 million. And in the 4th year, we've got 42 million. That's great news, but it still will not be enough. Okay, so I just want to temper your enthusiasm around that good news because, you know, we will use it all, but it still won't do what we need it to do, unfortunately. Okay, so last slide there I'll come on to is just, you know, what are we doing in the short term? Well, we're putting more resource into an inspections regime, and that's we're getting agency staff in just after Easter. They're coming in the next 2 weeks. There's a national demand for this, so it's really, really difficult to recruit in this area. So, and just to give you an idea, our rate of pay for an LCC inspector, so a permanent employee, is currently half what we're having to pay agency to get this resource in. So again, there's a thing about less bang for our bucks. We're delivering less with the money we have because everything is costing more. Okay. We are having to reprioritize what we're looking at in order to, so it's not really the ideal work we would do, but it's about keeping the network safe. That's got to be our top priority. We've changed how we're doing our repairs. I've said that to you, it's not ideal, but we're doing the majority temporary, but that's what we're having to do. And, you know, we're then reprogramming our budget for this coming year to look at how our work program for the coming year to look how we deal with those permanent repairs, and then looking at that longer term strategy about how we program over a year, knowing that we will have far more defects because the underlying state of the network means we're going to see more every year. Okay, I'm going to end on that, but happy to take any questions, Chair.
And thank you very much. That was brilliant, very informative. I just wondered actually whether there was a plan to send that around to all members, because I think all members of the County Council had benefited from seeing that, because I think it's a very useful plan. So the temptation at this point now is for every member to go around and start listing all the potholes in their division, but we won't do that. We won't do that. I've got a number of people want to ask questions. One from me for a start. I was at a conference a few weeks ago and I was talking to county colleagues from Oxfordshire. I think it was Oxfordshire. And they're saying that one of the things that they are doing is using sort of new technologies where they fit something under the bin lorries in the district, under the district's bin lorries, that helps to identify surface defects on the roads as it's driving over them. Is this something that we're looking at here or doing here, or I think it just occurs to me that if these lorries are going around anyway, then it might be a good thing to do.
I'll just maybe delay the bin lorry part of it till LGR, if that's all right, Chair. But I will answer the bit about basically technology, innovation. We have trialed basically visual inspection systems, so literally you drive the network and it's done by video. To be fair, we did do it probably about 18 months ago. And when we tested it against the inspectors, we found it to be less than 50% accurate. However, I'll just caveat that tech moves all the time, so we will go round that hoop again. So absolutely, we need to be using and employing technology when it's available and it does the job, and invest in that. Absolutely agree with that. The thing about on bin lorries is, to me, a debate under LGR.
Thank you. I'll go around the room this way and then we'll get everybody in. So Linda, will you?
Can this information go out to residents so that they know the situation that we're in and so they can understand why we've got the potholes that we've got?
We do communications, actually, if it's all right. I mean, I'm more than happy to, and Chair has shared the slides with members. I think I'd want to do just a kind of targeted, maybe get our comms colleagues to put something out to residents, absolutely, because most of them probably don't understand it's a combination of all these things that I've just set out for you today. So if it's okay, I'll take away action to work with the comms colleagues to do something that's a communication for the public. I do find it is forever an ongoing challenge to inform enough so people understand some of the things and why they're happening. But yeah, it's probably a very opportune time to do that.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful, actually. It's a sort of sanitised version to go out to members that can be shared with the public and parish councils and other things. I think the most striking stat in that for me is that most people won't see their road surfaced outside their house in their lifetime. Basically, on average, in average, you wouldn't see every 97 years. It's frightening. Going around, anybody else? So, Bill, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. And it follows on from what Linda's just been saying. I was talking to, I can't remember if it was you or Mr. Clark, a week or two ago about this issue. And I'm sure that whoever I was talking to said that the media was actually preparing a press release to go to the public about it.
We do have there's ongoing things. Usually it's in reaction to something. I think we could do something general about the kind of county-wide thing. So we could do that because, it is a drip thing.
Yeah, no, this was, if I may, Chair, this wasn't specifically because of the high reporting of potholes this February.
I'll double check what's going out. I have been in leave as well earlier this month. So I'll double check what's going out and we'll see if there's an next iteration if something has gone out.
Sorry, I missed carry on.
A quick one from me. Do we compare ourselves with countries of wetter, colder climes and what they do compared to what we do here if things are changing?
We do. No, that's a really, really good point because, I traditionally think that we're not brilliant as a country at looking at other places, but I do think we have got better, across this sector as well. I mean, often I get, the year we had the really hot temperatures, it was 40, wasn't it, in Lincolnshire, and we had loads of heat damage because they had roads melting, cracking, etc. And I get asked why, Australia doesn't get this. Why don't you? Why do we get this? And actually, it's the climate you're having to deal with. We have to deal with freezing temperatures and now we're having to deal with hotter temperatures. So it's learning from ones who are similar to us. The issue being, even if they've done something differently, we can't retrofit our whole network. It's never going to happen. It might be about what we do now in when we're repairing certain bits of the road or we're doing repairs and improvements, but there's still an issue about retrofitting the whole thing. But we do look at it, and it's also a challenge for the industry because things like the types of material we use, they're having to look, because we've got a changing climate, how they actually adapt that. So it is working with the industry and the sector to understand what's coming out, what's going to be better in terms of that climate, the demands in the network, the things we're having to meet, as well as things like decarbonisation, etc., because we're having to report to government how we're reducing our carbon on things like that. But the challenge for us is the risk of investing, because we want to know it's going to stand the test of time, and it's always a challenge with new materials coming in. So we like to trial it, so it's never really quick. So sorry, that was a long answer of yes, we've got an eye on it. It's not always a quick solution though.
And you mentioned retrofitting, which is clearly right. We can't start redoing, Victorian roads in some cases, or Roman roads in some cases in the county. But obviously we are now getting more and more roads coming and new estates all the time. And one of my worries, sitting as a district council planning committee, is how many times we hear that this road's not likely to be adopted because they're doing it different, not to adoptable standard or whatever. And it's always been a big bugbear of mine that district councils can't refuse planning applications on that basis. So is there work ongoing with the industry as well to make sure that our roads are sort of future proofed? Do you know? Maybe not fair to ask you that question, but I'm assuming that you were in some of these meetings where these things are with the developers, where they're talking about how they put their roads in.
I mean, I think it's a combination of that last question as well. We have a highway design guide, and that sets our standards out for our construction, etc. So where there is new things coming in, we think it's the right materials and construction type, it will go in that. If the developer wants their roads adopted, all they have to do, she said, is build it to that standard and we will adopt it. However, unfortunately, we all know, and you've got the evidence as well, that developers don't always do that.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much. I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, thank you very much for the new Derby Road in Loughborough. Well laid, and so thank you to the highways team for doing that. Feel free to come and repave or lay all of Loughborough East. That's more than welcome. But on a serious note, capacity. And what kind of capacity do we have in the team to be able to go and look, redo all the potholes that need doing after a bad winter, as well as deliver the everyday programme that we have and the work programme that we have? That's one. Two, we've had more funding. So does that mean that we can increase that capacity and have more teams out doing the remedials, but also doing the everyday work as well, because the funding has come through? And my final thing is, and this is something that's come from a department and a meeting I went to, is that county councils have now become very good at putting away money as contingency funding for something that's happening in the future or might happen in the future. And it's tens of millions and hundreds of millions in some. Why don't we actually use that money to do the repairs and the work that they're needed doing today, instead of thinking of a problem that might happen and trying to cover that problem? So it's just one of those where we've got contingency fundings being built up in the hundreds of millions if you look in our budgets, but we need potholes repairing today. Thank you.
I'm going to defer to the expert on the last part of the question, if that's all right. In terms of capacity, in the immediate one, we're challenged, I would say. We're predominantly an in-house model, so we've got our own workforce, but actually that model allows us, we use agency staff then to help us with the boom, and then the bus bit, we can go down to our core model as well. But as I mentioned to you with the inspectors, it doesn't mean you can always just turn the tap on, because they're just not there, because everybody else is demanding these skills as well. So I think in the short term, we have got some challenges. I think the benefit of the 4-year funding I mentioned to you, and the fact that that's increasing as well, we can plan and programme and resource up to that, because it's absolutely, you're right, it's about, we have to have the resource to deliver that increased programme, and that will be people as well. So we're developing a plan about how we do that, and we've got a bit more time to do that. So I'm a bit more confident about that. It's the short-term boom when everybody else has got that short-term demand, peak in demand as well. That's a bit more challenging for us. I'll refer to Declan and the other.
In terms of contingency funds, suppose it often gets a bit of blurring with sort of reserves. So we do hold kind of, you know, hundreds of millions of reserves, but they tend to fall into two pots. One being, as you've touched on, contingency type elements, but the other element is it's projects that we've kind of are identified and are ongoing that we've saved up in advance for, and the capital scheme is the biggest example of that. Rather than going out and doing external borrowing, we try and sort of put money aside as sort of things come along, and then we'll apply it directly into the capital programme. So in terms of where our reserves are, the absolute vast majority is into identified projects that things are ongoing with. And you can see that sort of come to pass a little bit because the reserves are running down, and actually we've got a bit of a gap in our capital programme in a few years' time. In terms of that contingency element, we do keep an eye on it, and it's something that gets reviewed sort of midway through the year and at sort of the annual MCFS, and we look at across the sort of sector as well. And obviously Grant Thornton come in and they take a view on, have we got sort of sufficient sort of level of contingency. So we do keep looking at that. We are relatively we're probably a little bit lower than sort of quite a few areas because we're trying to do active contingencies in our budgets that we sort of, again, we refresh each year. But that in terms of money just set aside for the rainy day, we are pretty low, and it's probably as low as we could kind of safely go as well, I think.
I think it's Rosita next.
Thank you. And being a pothole anorak, I'm having a comment and a moan as well as a question. So my comment is that we all are fully aware that vehicles with electric vehicles are getting heavier, tractors are getting wider, and we know that with the building agenda, traffic will never go down. So we are in a sort of hamster on a wheels situation. We also know that the cost of material will always go up, and investment will never be enough to cover everything. So I'll go to my moan first. So I also know, having been, as I say, a pothole anorak, that you said, and this is a proper way, that potholes should be filled in, sealed, etc. Now, over the years, since I've been looking, I have been moaning and meeting with highways officers over the quality, and a lot of the potholes weren't sealed, they weren't done properly. So whilst I appreciate that the weather has created new ones, but it also, the water went under the old ones because they weren't done properly, and we've got bigger ones now. And so, in my humble opinion, we have increased our workload down to poor quality. I also found that very often when we've had a pothole that was very deep, somebody came out, did some blobbing or plopping, as we call it, and left the pothole next to it. And then the excuse was it wasn't deep enough, and somebody came out again, wasting resources by doing it again. We've made a lot of mistakes. And so my question really is, and I have been moaning over quality for years. So you said there will be a lot of changes and challenging, and that you're reviewing the strategy. But my question really is, how are you going to look, because of the changing way of the world and with all of the mistakes that have been made, and there's no argument that mistakes haven't been made, how is this council to look at a more innovative approach for smarter working, for more efficient working, and making sure there is a better quality so we don't have to go back and do this work? And I know what you've just said, you're plopping now and then going back, but if things are done properly and efficiently, then we would be in the long run saving resources. I know you mentioned also materials, but how about looking at materials that are more cost effective? Because I read somewhere, you know, there is a way of looking at grinding down rubber because it is better for the environment in long term. And my last question is really looking at the way we are working long term. So I'll give you an example. So for instance, sometimes I see a whole road being done that leads to one farm. Recently, I saw a whole road which must have cost 100,000 that goes to 2 farms only. So surely, should we not prioritising when those works to the main highway system rather than, a prioritisation scheme? So I think that's quite enough for now. Thanks, Anne, for the report.
I'll have a go. I won't guarantee I'll cover all of them. And I'm not going to go around the quality one because I know we've had a lot of discussions about that, Rosita, haven't we, in the past and with officers. So I'm going to skip that one. Sorry. Things like leaving lesser potholes, that was one. The one where you said we go out and we do a pothole and then there's another one we leave and then we come out later. The issue for us then, and I get this is a really difficult one with the public because we get this all the time, but you came out here and there's one, 50 metres down the road, you didn't do that one. Why didn't you do that one when you were out? And it makes absolute sense to the public to do that. Our issue is it won't be at that safety critical level. And given that we don't have enough money and resource to do, we have to focus on those safety critical ones. So if I sent like that gang that day to do everything in that road, even although it doesn't meet our criteria for doing at the moment, but is a bit of a defect, chances are there's roads in the next village that are safety critical that are not getting done. Rock and hard place, and we've got to do the safety critical one. That's got to be number one priority. But I get from the public point of view, it looks, why are you not doing it? That's
my main issue, Anne. It's very much because we are where we're at. Right. And we've had this conversation over quality and we've had all of this conversation. And like I say, I'm an anorak on this, but we are where we are, and we've now realised that things are not changing, that we're going to have an increase of traffic, an increase of heavier vehicles, less funding, we'll never have enough. So how is the department looking at an innovative new strategy that is going to cover with smarter, more efficient working, a better strategy? Because I think now it's a time to start thinking outside the box, because otherwise we'll never. So that is really my question. That is what I'm interested in, not about me moaning, because I've moaned enough over the years. So, I
won't comment on that one. But no, it's all useful input. Thank you. On that point, absolutely agree. And we're not starting from, when I say we're reviewing a strategy, that's about our programming throughout the year. We're not starting fresh on this. We've been doing this for a number of years. We're in something called the Future Highway Research Group. That's about 20 local authorities and Cranfield University who are experts in this field. They come in and they do a value for money on efficiency in each of the highway authorities. They've come in and they've done us, and we've come out number top of all the authorities in that. Okay, it's just 20 and there's 150 authorities, but we've come out top in how we manage that, our resources and what we do, etc. We also are in things like we're a leading light in the Midlands Highway Alliance Plus. So that's our alliance of 36 highway authorities, route to markets and best practice. We've got various specialist interest groups on that. So it's all about best practice sharing, getting the best from the industry and the sector and driving forward. So we've got theme specific ones, highway maintenance, asset management ones. So it's about learning and sharing. I am on the leadership team, and I was the president of ADEPT, Association of Directors of Environment, Economy, Planning and Transport. And with that, they have a 30 million innovation programme they are delivering on behalf of DFT on materials, on how you use them best. So it's about plugging into all these things so we can take the best of that and develop our future strategies. So we're in there, Rosita, we're having those conversations. What I'd say to you is nobody in the country's cracked this and got the answer. We're all on a journey, but we are in there and we are trying to do that and learn where we can and implement that. One other thing I will just say, you mentioned materials, rubber and all that. We put recycled rubber in the Blaby bypass about 5 years ago. And what we're doing, I mentioned earlier about risk, and we need to know these
materials work. So we're monitoring how good that is. So, you know, if it stands the test of time, we'll roll out more of that kind of thing, etc. So we do, you know, trial innovation. I mentioned the, you know, using the videoing of the defects, etc. We'll trial different things and we'll implement what is useful for us, helpful, effective, cost effective, you know, as well as delivering the job. So it's a constant one because things keep changing all the time, but there's lots we're learning because we're plugged into really sector-wide best practice groups and resources.
Good answer, thank you. But should we not put that out as well in your report to the public? Because then when the public knows, we can say, look, this is what we're doing.
Quite a few of my points have been picked up. So just the last one I want to raise is sort of picking up on yours about developers and when they build new roads and paths, that they don't last 2 years, to be honest. So we're adopting them and they're really poor already. So I've seen loads of new estates, specifically in my area, that just need redoing and then we have to pay for that. So I think the condition that developers build their roads, I think needs looking at, and what action can we take. And then the second point on that is the repairs by utility companies. You know, as soon as they dig into the road, they weaken it and they don't repair it to standards and they don't last. So what are we doing about charging other people for the state that they leave our roads in rather than us having to pick up the cost?
Okay, thank you. If you can, Chair. On the developer thing, we have a maintenance period at the end. So when our developers built their new housing estate, etc., and want to put the roads forward for adoption, they have had to go through a process over a number of years and we've gone out while they're building it to check that they're doing it right, take samples and all the rest of it. So that process should have happened. When they get to the end of that and say, that's it, we're finished, we're off, we want you to adopt it, we have a minimum of a 12-month maintenance period. So what we say is, okay, you want this for adoption, we're going to look at this for a minimum of 12 months and see how it goes. If that goes okay, we'll take it on. If it doesn't go okay, that will keep going. We have got a site, I'm not going to mention where because it came up last week, some members might know where it is. We have been in a 20-year process and we've not taken that on because it's not up to standard. So we do have I'm not saying it's perfect and some don't, and we don't have some failures, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, but we have an extensive process where we know there's issues. We will not take it on because we know we're taking it on for the next 100 years. And look how often we resurface roads, not very often. So we need it to be to standard. So we do our best, Deborah, to make sure that we're taking on things to standard. The point on, your other point was utilities, yeah. We do have ability under the Act to enforce with utilities to get them back and make it to standard. But I think my issue is, and I think you already alluded to, the minute they've dug up the road and put a crack in it, even although it's sealed, it's weakened, it's open to defects. So kind of on a bit of hiding to nothing. Yes, we absolutely need to hold them to account, get them back in, make it up to standard. But we're still in a worse position than when that carriageway was, undug up, untrenched.
Yeah, I think this is like we're probably straying somewhere into sort of highway scrutiny territory here, but equally, it's absolutely right. And the other thing we get is planning of works by utility companies. BT come down one rig and it's the electric board the next, and people just think it's madness. And I get you must tear your hair out at times to deal with a lot of these things. And perhaps this is something. It's probably not for this committee, but it is something that all members get a lot of, and I'm sure it's probably something we need to be raising with our MPs, that there needs to be better coordination of this sort of stuff. Did you want to come in, Mr. Bulger? I've got Mr. Balls as well. Yeah, I've got Mr. Bulger.
Thank you very much. And thanks for your report. Appreciate it's an emotive subject, so I sympathise with your position. But one point you raised was around the payment of insurance claims or claims to members of the public, companies presumably, and all sorts of people. You sort of put it out as a virtue that Leicestershire paid less than maybe some around it, or even maybe nationally. Is a couple of sort of questions. One, do you think that's a good good governance thing for Leicestershire, or maybe others are have more largesse in that approach, and therefore what the impact of that is in terms of equity for Leicestershire, predominantly Leicestershire. I appreciate some of them may not be Leicestershire, but Leicestershire people who, you know, maybe therefore getting a worse situation than other people.
No, I appreciate, and sorry, you said I would put it out as a virtue. I don't mean to put it out as a virtue. I mean to put it out factually. I think the harsh reality is, because I do not underestimate the annoyance, frustration, anger, whatever else. If you get, you know, you damage to your vehicle for whatever, for a pothole, you claim to us and we say, sorry, we're not paying, you know what I mean? We defend that. And obviously we have to be able to legally defend that, you know, it's not a, you know, choice. But I come from the point of view, the more money we pay out in insurance or in claims, the less money I have to put into fixing the roads. You know, my interest is in keeping that highway safe. If I'm paying it to people to fix their cars, I'm not putting it in that. I don't underestimate for a minute that actually that is a major impact on those residents for Leicestershire. But it's a rocking hard place. But equally, we don't pay where we've got the case to do, and that stands up through the process. Otherwise, we will pay.
Okay, but you're acknowledging that Leicestershire is has a higher denial of claims than other similar authorities.
The facts say that, and I'm acknowledging we defend our claims, yes, and other authorities are less able to defend their claims.
We shouldn't lose the point. You can only defend a claim if either the road condition is good enough or your inspection regime is good enough to defend it. We don't defend, as Anne touched on, we don't have that legally defensible position. So there is a reason why we can do it, which doesn't mean that Leicestershire residents are worse off. It's more an indicator of actually Leicestershire residents are getting a better deal from kind of Anne's service than maybe some kind of neighbouring authorities. And if you do, I mean, it's anecdotal, but if you drive into sort of Notts and Derby, you do notice it. You can always see the county border. So it is, I wouldn't sort of equate just because people don't get insurance claims are getting a worse deal. It's actually people don't get insurance claims because overall the service is better.
I think the point that Mr. Pilgrim has made, it sort of puts something back in my mind as well. That is this about our network, or is this an ability to defend claims? And I think it will sort of wind people up if some of this message goes out. But I absolutely agree with Anne. You know, we can spend 20 grand on a claim, or we can spend 20 grand fixing that pothole that nobody else can damage their car on it. So you know, we can only spend the money once. So it is very. I think the question following on from that, you know, obviously at the moment we've got a lot of places, people like damp and mould is a big thing. District councils with housing functions will know about. There's a lot of these law firms going out, so, you know, trying to encourage people to put claims in if they've got damp in their council house against districts. Is there much of this in the industry, of these sort of no win, no fee solicitors going out trying to encourage people to put claims in against county councils? Because I know it, because they do.
The ones I'm aware of are the ones that come direct from the public, but the insurance team might have more awareness if they come from those types of companies that are kind of, you know, touting for business type thing. I'm not sure, sorry.
It's relatively easy to put a pothole claim in. So there's kind of I suppose the avenue for kind of the company, and often the claims are quite small values as well, you know, sort of £100, £200 sort of level. So it doesn't create that opportunities for you kind of those type of firms as much. It's more kind of, you might see a spike when the AARAC, Martin Lewis, when they say the expert, get on the, you know, this is how you make your claim type thing.
Mark, and then I think Rosita wants to come back.
Yeah, thank you very much. And it was just on some of the causes of this. And one of the predominant ones obviously is around planning and a rise in building. Often these new estates are built on low classification roads or off low classification roads, and that compounds the problem because these roads weren't built for the traffic, for the construction vehicles and for the volume of traffic that follows it. Yet a perennial frustration, I think, of residents and again as a borough councillor is it often feels that these applications get almost passed through that much challenge from highways. Do you think that might change, knowing that we are facing a bit of a catastrophe on the highways, that we are compounding it by not potentially defending the applications from a highway point of view, because there is an opportunity to be more strict potentially in how we say, actually, that isn't acceptable, it's in the wrong place, the road isn't capable of it, the road network isn't capable, but it seems to get passed through. So I just wondered if it would change the strategy of how we assess the highways needs on planning applications.
Just to clarify, the highways response to a planning application is a technical one. It has to accord with the National Planning Policy Framework and our own local guidance. Okay, so it's not a case of, you know, this one's okay or that one's not. It has to meet certain criteria. And the main test is in the National Planning Policy Framework is the presumption in favour of development. So in effect, you have to prove the impact of a development is severe. There is no key definition of severe apart from previous precedents through planning case, or else you end up in appeal. So the bar is actually quite high. The key things we have to look at from the highways point of view is the capacity of the network, are the junctions, you know, completely over capacity, etc. And is it safe? Okay, is there safety issues? Now, the premise is well works on, a new development comes along. Basically, if it shows it can mitigate, i.e. consume its own smoke, regardless of how congested the local junctions are, etc., your local network is, we cannot refuse that. Or we could recommend refusal. We would end up in appeal and we would lose that appeal because there's not the guidance, the regs don't support that. So the highways response, because it's often quite a misnomer with a lot of the public, etc., that we could just say, just refuse it, because, you know, either a local community doesn't want that development or they don't think the roads are suitable. Unless we can defend that under the guidance in the regs, we cannot put in a recommendation of refusal. So in terms of your original question, the state of the road network, i.e., you know, the maintenance, the condition of it, I don't think that will change our ability to make any different responses to planning applications.
Yeah, I've made this point at many planning committees that there is a huge disconnect between what's the guidance and what how others can judge these things at versus what the public see with their own eyes every day. And they just don't see, you know, what one person's severe is not an inspector's severe, and that is there is a huge disconnect, and I think there always probably will be. Rosita, you wanted to come back? Can you make it brief?
It's actually on the same point here, so you really precurse what I was going to say. So, as you know, I've been asking in previously, how could we possibly, you know, get something out of big operators like warehousing and whatever, and you know, you answered that in a way. But in my humble opinion, are we, or the question is, are we still working on something like that? So if, say, for instance, I'll give you a little bit of so in Harborough, in the local plan, we are going to have 140 hectare of additional warehouses. The applicants are going to put in an application, and they're saying that it's no serious impact on the highways, you know, which is, you know, not quite, you know, there will be, and, you know, but then they're saying, well, there are 25 million going in business rates to the district council, and then they can fix the highways. And we know it is not the district council who does it, but people believe so. So what I'm actually asking is this council, because you're saying we're looking at a new strategy, a new way of working, etc., you know, for this council, looking at also trying to find a legal way if we're going towards LGR, where then everything comes under one, and if we're going with local plans to SIL, to put in an element, because then we can justify it for highways, you know, because within the SIL, there will also be an element that warehousing and logistics will have to pay a certain amount of community infrastructure level. So the question is quite simple. Are we still looking at legal terms that we will be able in future to claim something of logistic operators, etc., for the use of the highways? Or, you know, if it comes to rate distribution, that some will go to highways.
Have a go. I mean, I think at the moment, as you know, any employment type thing like that, if they have to improve again, they have to do the assessment. You gave an example there of they're saying they had no impact. They have to put in an assessment and it will demonstrate if they get impact or not. We will look at that and we'll accept it or we won't accept it. So, you know, either they will have an impact or they won't have an impact, but that will be technically proven one way or another. Okay. I think what you're getting at, isn't it? Will we be able to under SIL take an element for maintenance? Because at the moment we can't legally, through development, take an element of maintenance. I will have to fess up and say I am not an expert in SIL. You know, we don't have SIL anywhere in the county yet. Charnwood is the first one looking to bring it in, but certainly it's maybe a question I will take away and ask my colleagues if that's all right.
Thank you, if I may come back, because I think it's really important as we're going towards LGR and whatever. So I think if we have that legally in place, and also with districts having still going to have local plans and going towards SIL, that is worked in, because at the end of the day, that is where we know that a lot of damage is coming from. But I know, because I demonstrated it, one of our or your project officers, when I had a big development, they made sure that all of the roads were photographed before the development, and then they were photographed after, and then we, you know, could charge them because it was serious money, the damage they caused. So, you know, that was implemented, and it was a two-way work with district councillors as well.
Mr. Austin, did you want to come in, and then Mrs. Knight, and then moving on to this?
Thank you. I haven't been called Mr. Austin for a long while, Stuart. Thank you. Frustration I have is it's not so much on the road itself, actually, but as you know, Anne, I represent probably the largest rural area in Leicestershire, certainly the longest, if not the largest by a square mile. And they, as you can imagine, I'm a farmer myself, and we have lots of country lanes, which are effectively dirt tracks, really, bit of tarmac thrown on them. And as we've moved on over the years, they've all become rat runs. And I get that as well. People want to get to work, get back to work. But the problem we have is, of course, as Rosita's already said, agricultural machinery is getting bigger. As on top of the HGVs that aren't supposed to use country lanes, but they do. And so it carries on. And consequently, you go down in your humble little car or even on a cycle, and you meet traffic and everyone goes to the side. And after many years, the consequence of this is a hole on the side of the road outside my son's house, literally that deep. It's been reported. Now, I accept it's not the county council's responsibility to mend the side of the road, actually, because where does the road finish? I get that. But it's a massive danger, because you drive down these lanes, as well as looking for the potholes to miss over, you're now looking at the side of the road because you can't pull off anywhere because the potholes are that bad on the side of the road, which isn't a county council responsibility. I get that, seriously.
Just if I can come back in a few points, and sorry, one of my colleagues will not forgive me if I don't come back to you on the point about rat runs. Unless there's a weight restriction or any kind of restriction, anybody's entitled to use any road. I know we all think at some points people rat run, but actually any traffic is entitled to use any road unless there's a weight restriction or some other type of restriction. So technically they aren't rat runs. I absolutely understand, however, some roads are less suitable for certain types of traffic or heavy volumes of traffic. We absolutely understand that. Yeah, ongoing challenge, rural roads, HGV, size of farm traffic, just running off the edge. And one of the programmes when, you know, I don't know if you recall it quite a while ago now, that graph where the funding actually went down in the middle years, went down quite a lot. We cut back on all our edging treatments, haunching. That's the bit of the edge. That's what you call the bit that works at the edge of the thing, doing some haunching work. We stopped doing a lot of that because we just couldn't afford it. And we are beginning to reap the you know, not the rewards, the opposite of that, because you have got overruns and then it wears away. Just to clarify, however, we are responsible for the edge of the road. We are responsible to the edge of the highway boundary. The highway boundary is normally, there's always exceptions, to a boundary feature. So it could be a grass verge, there could be a hedge, there could be a ditch, there could be a fence, normally to that. And we are responsible for that. That's a highway verge. So we are responsible for those. Now, we're all come to, and you and your rural area are well aware of these things. Like we've got boats, haven't we, byways open to all traffic, whereby we don't really maintain those. And some people, if there's one or two houses down there, don't, unfortunately, they have a lot of potholes and things like that. It is about that prioritisation. If we've got A-class roads with safety issues on them, obviously we're going to have to do those before a quieter rural road in the haunching. However, at some point, that edging part will become classed as a Cat 1 safety defect because of the safety risk, and then we will do it. So it all comes back to that risk assessment and safety.
Kerry, I'm giving you the last word on this subject.
Short and sweet. Anyway, fantastic. 4 years worth of funding to make an improvement. We have major and minor potholes which should go out and fix as and when you can. Would there be opportunity to do like focused area fixing, so it's more evident to our constituents that we're focusing on an area of, instead of it being a scattergun approach across the whole county? I just think it visually for our residents, that if they saw us in an area fixing, I know you've got to do the major and the minors as well, but if you're focused on an area, I don't know whether you can do it going forward.
As long as it's my area.
If you focus on an area, you could announce it to that area, couldn't you? Say, right, we're focusing on fixing the potholes in this area in June, July, whatever. I just think visually it'd be better than this scattergun approach where they're just doing it all over the place. Secondly, we've had loads of flooding and we've now got flood wardens. Could we have, I don't know, pothole wardens that have got a bucket of muck that if one suddenly emerges, they can run out and throw it in and tamp it down and then record? I don't know. And, could we have pothole wardens? I don't know. Just an idea.
Sorry, can I love the enthusiasm, but honestly, my insurance and legal colleagues will take deep breaths just in terms of the health and safety. We cannot have people going out and working in the live carriageway. We just can't do it. Sorry. You've got to be suitably trained. We just couldn't do it. Different for reporting, but then we've got 750,000 people who like to report potholes to us as well, which is great because we need to know. Our inspectors pick them up, but we need people to report them as well, but not to do works. Absolutely agree with the sentiment, but unfortunately in the day and age we live, legally and insurance wise, we just could not make that happen. Okay, in terms of the focus in an area, absolutely get it. It'd be easier for the public to say, right, you're getting a bit here, but I do take Mr. Orson's point, it needs to be everybody's area. But actually, I'm going to come back from that because we have to work on safety and the risk element. And that unfortunately doesn't work in just this area now. It works all over the place and we have to do that. What I would say, however, is I'm working with my teams to think how we can get better communications to you and your constituents about what's going on in your area. So you've got better visibility. So that is something that's kind of on the to-do list because I think we have been underselling ourselves and it's not been that visible to you as members or to your constituents. So we are working on that.
Right. Anne, can I just give you committee's thanks for the very comprehensive responses you've given to us today. So it has been agreed that you work with comms colleagues to put out a briefing or something to members that we can use. Clearly, the full report that we've seen today is available on the webcast to the public anyway, but nevertheless, it'd be useful to have a more summary version. So thank you very much for that. And I'm just going to hand back to Neil now, who's going to talk to us about the main risk management update report.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to cover off the main report now. So this report is a return to our routine update on the corporate risks that we have. There's some updates on emerging risk and a brief notification of an audit that's taken place of the corporate risk management process. So the detailed updates on all corporate risks are provided in Appendix A, which is page 129. But before I take any questions on those, I just want to refer to some other changes in the main report. So paragraph 6 introduces two new risks that are relevant to children's and family services, one on capital funding, the other one on deficit budgets. And then paragraph 8 explains a long-standing risk covering transporting children with special needs has been redefined because the emphasis of the risk has changed. In terms of emerging risks, it was previously mentioned by Anne or alluded to by Anne. Paragraphs 10 and 11, we tried to take account of some of the impacts on the County Council of the war in Iran, caused especially by oil and gas prices and supply chain issues. And then paragraphs 12 to 15 provide what was an update at the time of writing the report on the LGR position. Obviously, since then, consultations have closed and the County Council has provided its thoughts to the media on other authorities' plans. It is planned, Chair, that we would, after the government's announcement in the summer, perhaps the September committee will receive a presentation on LGR risks. And finally, the report paragraph 16 to 18, just a brief mention. We had a recent internal audit of the County Council's risk management process. Whilst this was overall positive, I'll be working through the recommendations to improve the process over the spring and early summer. So that's all I have to say on the main report. Gladly take any question.
Yeah, it's on Appendix B, Neil. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, you've got several risks, obviously, particularly SEND and EHCP capacity and UASC placements and school capital shortfalls. Now, they all show deteriorating or static risk scores despite extensive mitigation lists. So the question is, what independent evidence or external validation exists to confirm that these mitigations are actually reducing likelihood or impact rather than simply documenting ongoing operational pressure?
It may help. We do have some external validation from the external auditor of our risk management registers and processes. In terms of the actual scoring, I guess that might come through independent assurance of the departments, where they have independent reviews, but not in terms of this register itself. Is there any independent scoring? We take it through to the chief officers, so I build it up from what's happening independent. So each of the chief officers has a chance to challenge the scores and the risks and the actions that are taking place.
Okay, thanks.
Just to add that, there's obviously kind of a bit of a sea change with the government's approach. So in the past, when this was all on our books, you'd get support from the Department for Education, but it was relatively kind of passive. Now that they're a bit more sort of full-blooded, they're going to take over the kind of the whole SEND sort of system. Well, that's what they're alluding to. They're obviously sort of their level of interest has ramped up, so formal plans are having to be produced that will then get reviewed by sort of a dedicated DFE advisor, and that's a condition on us being able to kind of have our deficit paid down, the 90% payment that's been promised. So there is that new layer of assurance that's come into place in addition to kind of primarily the internal and external kind of assurance that's already been existing.
Thank you. Rosita, you had a comment?
Just a comment on page 130 onwards. We are talking about EMT and we are talking about SIL on the back of our previous conversation. Should we not look at on that how to manage the risk to also include looking to maintain or get maintenance for the road upkeep rather than providing infrastructure, because I think that is something, as I said before, really important that we look at that towards the future. And then we're talking somewhere, and I've lost it now, about the maintaining of primary schools. But surely should we not be looking at also in working into the solution, trying to work with our partners, local authorities, to work on the local plans to ensure that all of this is featured, because that's the way forward, because where we are working as a unit, not in silos, to ensure these things are delivered. Thank you.
Try and pick up bits of those, obviously not my full area, but so the schools is a good example, and it's an area of spend that we have prioritised as a council in discussion with the district councils. But you're absolutely right, it is very much that partnership agreement, because the districts then are the ones sort of have the statutory responsibility to work with the developers to put the Section 106 in place. So you're absolutely right to hit the nail on the head with it, is that partnership working approach. But education is the area we've tended to prioritise because we've got that sort of statutory responsibility. We also obviously sort of have a big push for the sort of the infrastructure, the highways assets as well, because that has sort of such a big implication. But the big problem tends to be that even where we've got agreement with the districts, there's not always enough money to go around, and then a level of prioritisation has to happen between what we're looking for in infrastructure, things like affordable housing, etc. So I think it's that continual challenge. It's probably something that's worth bringing back to this committee as a presentation about what's happening in the future, because things like the spatial development strategies should help as well, or sort of try to reinforce that whole area approach, make sure development's happening in the right places, and we're kind of joined up. So I wonder whether that is a topic for the future, because it does come up a bit, and there is movement by the government in what's happening, but this is one that's it's a Forth Road Bridge type one. Even when you think you've cracked it, something in the world changed, and you've got to keep working at it.
Well, I just think it is really important that we are starting to future-proof all of these things, because if we don't start now, the way everything is going, we're going to be on the back foot and reactive rather than proactive. So I think, the same as in highways, just, we need to be innovative and look forward and start to rethink. So maybe.
Thank you. Well, I think it's probably something that members need to discuss. Whether this committee is the right committee for that, I'll leave that to go to Democratic Services officers to come up with. Really, Deborah, you wanted to come in?
Thank you. Just looking at the new risks that have been added specifically in paragraph 7, the maintain primary schools, the risk of them closing due to financial burdens. Obviously, we don't just have maintain primary schools; we also have academies within our area, and I just don't see anything about the risk of if our primary schools maintain ones fall over, then obviously there's additional burden on academies, and if we have any academies that are struggling in the area, what's the impact of that? So I just wonder if this is just too narrow, this risk, and whether it should be expanded further to cover all schools within Leicestershire.
The key thing on there is it's the finances that come back to the council, where if an academy school closes, it stays within the academy's trust, where if a maintained school closes, it's still part of LCC, and then there's some of that liability comes back to us.
I think it's the risk of places as well. So it's not just finances, the risk of primary school places will put pressure on other schools in the area if schools close. So it's not financial, it's the risk of school places as well, I think.
You can get them to have a look. Part of the, obviously, I suppose, bear in mind the context here is that there's insufficient pupils on roll to sort of maintain that sort of school on a sort of financial footing. So it's kind of, there may be a bit of pressure, and like I say, we'll take away and have a look at it, but it's kind of, because it's sort of a small school problem, it's probably not the primary issue.
Okay, Appendix B again, Neil. Given the MTF's gap has escalated to 85 million, and multiple red-rated risks, SEND placements, DSG, recruitment, cyber infrastructure, and so on, explicitly state that they are expected to remain high and red. So what assurances can the council provide that its current mitigation plans are anything more than descriptive rather than demonstratively effective in reducing risk exposure?
It's effectively I suppose the annual MTFS cycle that we kind of go through. So we'll set a plan at the start of each year, demonstrating kind of where our pressures are and what the saving requirement is, and have we got any sort of I suppose financial gap that we're having to fill with reserves. And as sort of, I suppose, as the year goes on, we do the normal monitoring that sort of shows how we're meeting that plan, how we're delivering to budget effectively. And then when we come round to the MTFS next year, there's almost another kind of reset position and seeing did we meet our plan. So it's kind of, we've obviously been pretty successful to date, even though there's the continual ongoing pressure. Touch wood at this point, we don't think we'll ever have had to use reserves to balance an in-year budget positioning, which is obviously kind of in contrast to other people. So even where we've had budget gaps approved at county council that we've had to fill in reserve, we've always been able to sort of close those gaps before the year's kind of finished. And like I say, and for us to maintain the MTFS and deliver the savings is the other kind of key indicator that we've got in there. So it's a continual problem. If you think about it, as every year the MTFS rolls on, you've got another year's worth of demographic pressure, inflationary pressures that tend to exceed government grants plus council tax. So you're always on that kind of that loop of needing to find new savings to mitigate the pressures.
Any more? No. Okay. So look, I'm going to move the recommendations on block. Some of them invite us to feed in for other areas that we might wish to be looked at. Is there anything anybody wants to say? Any of the recommendations? No. So I'll move them on block Then is that agreed? Anybody against? No. Okay. And our final report. Thank you very much, Neil, for your reports. You're sending out your money this week. And can I just move on then to the REPA? It's a report that comes annually, and we've got Gary Collins here from our Head of Regulatory Services to present the report. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you, Chair. You'll all be delighted to know that this will be fairly brief. This is an annual report brought to this committee, and it's a requirement of the relevant codes of practice under the RIPA legislation to ensure that the Council's policy statement on the use of covert surveillance remains fit for purpose. As outlined in paragraph 2 of the code, elected members should review the policy but not be involved in making decisions whether or not a particular activity should be authorised. Essentially, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, known for short as RIPA, provides the legal framework ensuring that covert investigatory techniques are lawful, necessary, proportionate and compliant with Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. It prevents essentially the misuse of surveillance methods. For this local authority, the types of covert surveillance, one is directed surveillance, which includes the covert operation of individuals with or without recording equipment. A fanciful term called covert human intelligence sources. In a local authority context, that tends to be officers undertaking covert test purchasing relating to illicit products, counterfeit products, and that kind of thing, an interaction on things like for close Facebook sites, etc. It's essentially where they're taking on a persona and not declaring that they're an actual investigator. And the third area is communications data, and that is around, it doesn't include the content of a communication that is deemed to be intrusive, and a local authority is not a relevant authority for that purpose, but it can include, for example, subscriber details, and in the context that we tend to use it would be around identifying, for example, a rogue trader that may be at a vulnerable elderly person's doorstep, leaves a mobile number, and will make inquiries to establish who that actual prospective suspect is. Oversight, from a local authority point of view, there's an additional layer, unlike other enforcement agencies like the police. So we have an internal approval system, and then we have to go off to the magistrates court and seek an authorisation or a judicial approval to the authorisation that we've applied for internally. The use for the local authority in this county council, in paragraph 16 there, it just gives you an outline. It looks pretty low. What I would say on the CHIS authorisation, we've shifted this year. We approached the magistrates court to seek an authorisation to enable officers to act across the whole county of Leicestershire in relation to a specific and real problem that we've got in the county, as many other counties have, and that's in relation to the supply of illicit products, particularly illicit tobacco and vapes, etc. So that one particular authorisation allows named officers to act covertly to make those initial test purchases in order to build the evidence up. There's been one directed surveillance authorisation and 8 communications data applications. And what we would do with each individual communications data application is to seek the information to identify, for example, that individual or the evidence that we're seeking. What I would say is that in the trading standards context, in the local authority context, most of this covert activity relates to the evidential bundle that we eventually get to if we embark upon a prosecution, rather than gathering intelligence. So, for example, a test purchase, the officer would wear covert equipment and it would capture the actual seller making that sale, and that would be our primary evidence in relation to a prosecution case. We had an inspection by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office last year, and that was reported in the report this time last year. We sit fairly high in terms of the standards that we adopt here, and we've been given the green light in terms of how we operate. We will only utilise authorisation, this authorisation process and covert surveillance techniques if there is no other less intrusive way in which to obtain that evidence. So essentially that's it. And what we're saying this year is that there is no need to make any changes to the policy. If there was, Chair, it would then go to the Cabinet for approval. So it remains fit for purpose.
Gary, thank you very much for that. Any questions or comments on this one? Yes, Gordon.
Yeah, thank you for that. I used to authorise this within Inland Revenue and then within Revenue and Customs. One of the problems that we encountered was in a large organisation such as the local authority, or certainly the organisations I was talking about, we tended to get some of our staff freelancing, in so much that people would drift by places and start doing surveillance and then reporting things, etc. So we had to very much get the word out there. You do not do that. Do you find similar things actually happening within your organisation at all, where you get evidence produced but you can't effectively use it because it's not been authorised?
Within the Trading Standards Service, who was the primary user on a county council, we have that under good control because we do invest quite a lot in the training. All team managers are aware. Corporately, we have on our intranet what we call a RIPA homepage, and it essentially advises all county council employees that they essentially need to come through to two authorising officers, one of which is myself, and the other one is the Patrick Taff, head of law, assistant head of law, who will receive inquiries from other departments, and we have had a few. They tend to be in the areas of where there is potential fraud, and this year there's been no need to support that manager in order to progress through. On the point of the drive-by, there is some legal interpretation on that. So in other words, we would not need to seek an authorisation if it's an immediate response to events, or if we were potentially having a look at an area, but you've got to be very careful because you will cross that line. There's a good understanding within the service on that issue, and the courts have up to this date supported us, and we will always make clear on the application that if it has been a drive-by, we've assessed the situation and this is what we need. But it's an important point you make, and certainly within a local authority setting, because it is quite rare for this county council to use covert surveillance techniques, it's about keeping that awareness and raising the awareness, which we do via the intranet.
So, Deborah, did you raise this? No. Joe, please.
Hello, Gary. As you well know, I've always thought of Trading Standards as the unsung hero of Leicestershire County Council, especially given the amount of resources they get as well. They do tremendous work, and always at high in admiration. But just want a bit of a scrutiny question for you, though, and that is, you rely on NAFN and IPCO for scrutiny of communication data applications, yet the policy does not specify how internal quality control prevents flawed or overly intrusive applications from reaching external bodies. So what internal audit or sampling process is in place to detect errors, overreach, or systemic misuses before applications are submitted?
Okay, on the communications data side, the National Anti-Fraud Network, which is hosted, believe it or not, by Gateshead Council, it's prescripted in legislation that they are the only gateway in order for us to obtain communications data. So we have to make an online application to them, and essentially the decision makers will be NAFAN in line with the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, who then give it the approval, rather than the other two circumstances where we go off to the Magistrates Court. It's a fairly stringent process, and on making the application you have to satisfy the necessity proportionality criteria. So the audit process, there is an audit carried out annually of NAFAN and any submissions that we put through, because communications data is very technical. So it may not just be a mobile phone number, for example. We might be trying to seek a route where somebody's accessed a computer through an internet service provider. In some circumstances, we'll have to make that approach to seek banking information, for example, where a victim's money has gone into an account and when that was communicated via the app. So it's a pretty stringent process, which is really left to them. We make the application and they will refuse them and ask us to review it from our side of things. So I provide the sign off for that. So it is a fairly strict system. And I'll just say thank you very much for your comments. The staff do appreciate that Trading Standards is supported in this authority, bearing in mind we have quite significant resource issues with the pressures that the service is on at the minute.
That's what you always have had for a long, long time. Yeah.